Hi everybody. It's so great to be here with you today. Really an honor to be chosen as a speaker. So thank you. Big thank you to the Advocacy Alliance for having me. But also a big thank you to everybody in this room. I know a lot of you had to travel a far distance to get here, take off of work. There's some expenses involved, but what that tells me is that you're aware that what we're doing here really matters. And your voice matters too. And so today I'm really hoping to kind of give you some of the tools to get to the point of awareness and action. So, like I said, my name is Jessica, and I'm many things. I am a college admissions advisor. I'm a freelance writer, a prolific reader, recently a fossil hunter. But one of my most important roles is as a community member. And I fulfill that role as the founder of Rareatives, which is an online patient-led, patient-focused rare disease publication. I have been writing in the rare disease space for 5 years, but my experience in the rare disease space spans about 33. So soon after that adorable photo of myself was taken as a little kid, I was diagnosed with Kawasaki disease, which is an ultra-rare inflammatory blood vessel disorder. Luckily, I recovered pretty normally, but the next 30 years were marked with a lot of different health challenges. So hearing, gastro, immunity. And over the last 3 or 4 years, I've received my next 2 rare diagnoses. So it's definitely been a journey, and one that I still struggle with. And all that is to say is that even though I don't have MSMDS, I do understand a lot of the struggles that you've gone through. I have been shuffled from doctor to specialist to specialist to specialist to specialist, and so on. I've cried in waiting rooms. I have begged someone to listen. I've fired my doctor. I know what it's like to fight, to feel like your story is important and that you're being heard, and to still feel like you're alone. And because of that, that's what drives me. My mission is to rewrite the narrative around rare diseases, and to make sure that these stories are coming to light, because they're so important to tell. Because without raising our voices and advocating for our rights, there is no change. Everybody in this room is the change. And if you look around this room now too, these are your people. These are the ones who understand what you mean when you say, I've had to wait 6 months for that specialist appointment, or I have to fight with insurance again to get this covered. You're in a room full of experts because each one of you is an expert on your child. And so today we're going to talk about something that you do every day, which is tell stories. You tell your child's story to doctors, to researchers, to family members, to insurance agents, and you've probably told some version of that story hundreds, if not thousands of times. But what I've learned and what I want to share with you is that how you tell that story matters. The way you frame your child's experience shapes everything from the quality of medical care you might receive. It can influence research funding. It can convince a skeptical insurance reviewer to become an advocate. It can even convince your neighbor to do some fundraising for you. So your story has power, and I want to teach you how to harness that. So we're going to cover the importance of storytelling, how storytelling can create connections and raise awareness, how to craft your narrative, so tips, tricks, and strategies, especially based on the audience that you're talking to. So how to frame your story based on which audience you actually want to resonate with. And then finally, how to navigate challenges, the common pitfalls that people face when they're trying to write. And everybody faces those, including me. At the end of this session, we'll also have some time for workshopping. I have paper, pencils, pens, and I'll also be here to give any feedback or bounce any thoughts off of. Living or taking care of someone with a rare condition can be difficult. But sharing your story acts as a bridge to connect you to other people, both in this community and outside of it. When you share your story, and more importantly, when you feel open and comfortable sharing your story, you can humanize MSMDS for the people around you, especially the ones who haven't heard of it before. Storytelling fosters empathy. It creates understanding. You learn how to navigate challenges, and it also extends into policy and research. So sharing your story can catalyze change by driving policy reform or shaping research to focus on specifically what you're looking for. The patient and caregiver voice is so often excluded from conversations around what to do next. But by sharing your experiences, you can change the trajectory of what's going to happen next for people across the globe. There are a lot of reasons, though, why people don't feel comfortable sharing their story. And I spoke to a bunch of people that I have interviewed, both at Patient Worthy and Rareatives, about the reasons why they're most uncomfortable sharing their story. And what I got was fear, which is telling your story can be overwhelming or it can be scary. Not knowing the right words, and I'll tell you right now that there are no right words. Your words are the right words, so that's something to focus on. Anxiety, especially if you've gone through medical trauma or medical gaslighting, having to relive that can be really upsetting. There can also be a lack of community support, privacy concerns, or simply a lack of opportunity to share it. Where do you share it? How do you share it? But before we dive into some of the effective storytelling techniques, there's actually one big obstacle to telling your story that I hear from most people that I didn't put on that last slide. Does anybody have any idea what that is? Is that most people don't consider themselves to be a storyteller. So when I say share your story, I hear a lot, I don't know how to do that. I'm not good at storytelling. But the fact of the matter is that you tell stories every single day of your life. You tell stories about what happened at work. You tell stories about the hobby that you just did. So the way that you're engaging with the people around you is through storytelling. So really, what you're doing isn't giving you a new skill, it's just building upon that skill that you already have. But more than that, there's no right way to tell your story. So I'm a writer. That's how I do best. I am actually a little bit anxious about public speaking, so it's something that I've been pushing myself to do to be more comfortable with. But if you're not a writer, maybe you can try a poem or sing a song. Maybe photography is the way that you want to do that. Maybe it's painting. At the end of the day, whether you're creating key points that you want to focus on, or you're practicing a speech in a mirror, I don't want you to feel constrained by expectations, because there are no expectations around sharing your story. It's your story that you want to share what matters to you in the best way for you. And so with these techniques, hopefully you'll be able to make this process a little bit easier. So every time you tell your child's story, you have a goal in mind. And sometimes that goal is explicit. So maybe you're talking to a new doctor or specialist, and you're trying to come up with the next appropriate treatment plan. Your goal sometimes isn't as clear. This might be explaining something to a family member or building rapport with a new specialist. So the first step that you want to do here is being clear about that purpose. Are you looking for research? Are you looking for resources? Do you want action? Do you simply want information? Every single thing that you're going to do and every purpose that you have has a different approach, but also different emotional weight that you want to assign to that story. At the end of the day, your child's story doesn't change, but the way that you tell it should. I also want you to think about a story as having an architecture, kind of like a house. So the facts, which are the diagnosis, the key medical events, how you're doing treatment right now, that's the foundation of the story. That's not really going to change. But from there, you have your supporting structures and also your finishing details. So this is going to change based on exactly what you're trying to do. But regardless of the finishing details and the things, you want to make sure that you are, number one, practicing authenticity. Authenticity is the bedrock of storytelling. It invites others into the raw experience that you're living. So when sharing your story, be genuine and true to your experience. When I used to work at Patient Worthy, which is another rare disease media website, one of my colleagues once said, "Don't mistake other stories for your own." Yes, everybody in this room has shared aspects of your experience, but your experience is yours. So don't feel like you have to compete or you have to prove yourself, because at the end of the day, what you've gone through and what your child has dealt with is enough. The next is emotions. Emotions are really the heart and soul of storytelling. So don't be afraid to share your feelings. We've heard a lot today about the highs and lows, and you want to talk about both of those. That creates a powerful bond between yourself and the people that you're speaking with. And then finally, vulnerability is crucial to effective storytelling. It takes courage to be vulnerable, and it's really hard, but it's often in these moments that you're most deeply making those connections with other people. But also give yourself grace. Not everything is going to be comfortable to talk about. Sometimes you're going to slip over your words. If you're sharing something that you think is going to be a little bit vulnerable and hard to talk about, practice beforehand. Make sure you know the details that you want to get across. Details matter. So I'm about to describe my boyfriend in full, but have you ever had a friend that they want to share a story with you and they're really excited about it, but they add detail after detail after detail, and by the time they're finished, they've gone off on like a tangent and you're like, I have no clue what you're trying to say right now? Because if you are, you can raise your hand if you're that friend too, because I am. Details are important. You want to make sure you have those rich details when you're sharing your story, especially sensory details. So you want to think about, like, what did you feel in a moment? What did you see? What did you smell? What did you hear? That helps the person that you're speaking with or your reader really immerse themselves in your experience. But at the same time, if you, like my boyfriend, add 75 extraneous details to your story, it's going to make it a little bit hard for everybody to follow. Vivid descriptions can totally enhance what you're trying to say, but if it's excessive, it can bog down your story and it can make it too hard to follow. People might not listen. As you're writing, ask yourself, does this detail contribute to my overall message? Is it necessary to understand the experience that I'm trying to get across? Remember, storytelling is about effective communication. So sometimes less is more. This is also something that I struggle with, especially with my storytelling, is I want to include everything. I want to give everybody the big picture. But at the end of the day, you have to be careful to include the most impactful details, and that will make your story hit the hardest. Another mistake that I see some people make is the mistake of telling the same story to every person. This is usually, especially in the rare disease space, the medical story, just because that's the one that you have to repeat the most. And also, you know your story by heart. You live it every day. The people that you're speaking with may not. So it's important not to confuse the story that you're telling your cardiologist or your geneticist with the story that you want to tell your mother-in-law. So right here, the big picture is language. For the last couple of years, I've gone to Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill, and we go around on Tuesdays and we talk to our legislators about rare disease policy. And before that, we have a session on how do you shape the language that you're going to use when you're talking to your legislators. If I say, my B and T lymphocytes don't work exactly the way that they're supposed to, which means every time I come into contact with pneumococcal and streptococcal bacteria, that legislator is going to be completely lost. He's going to have no idea what I'm saying. If I pose it more like, your body makes antibodies when it comes into contact with bacteria. Mine doesn't all the time, which is why I'm sick a lot. It's a little bit easier for them to grasp. And from there, you can kind of get a little bit more in depth based on how much that person is kind of interacting, asking you questions. But I'm going to tell you kind of about the 3 most important audiences that you'll talk to and how you shape that language that you use when you're speaking to them or writing to get your message across. And the first is that heart connection. So that's your loved ones, your friends, your family, neighbors, if you are religious, your faith community. And these are the people that want to help, but they don't always know how to do it. So when you're speaking to your loved ones or you're writing your story that for your loved ones to understand, you want to lead with emotion and relationship. Start with what they already know about your child, their personality, their interests, their place in the family. Then you kind of layer in the medical stuff as context. So instead of coming right in with the medical information, you might say, oh, you know, my child loves going to the playground, running around, but they have a condition called MSMDS, which can cause fatigue and breathing difficulties. So we have to kind of temper what we do that might trigger that. As you can see, the first version leads with the medical information, but the second version leads with the child that they already know and uses the medical information to kind of frame why you might have to do certain things. When you're talking to your heart connection, your loved ones, you also want to think about like what they can do to help. It's never a bad thing to ask for help. It can be hard, but it can be hard for people to step in too if they're not exactly sure what you need. So you want to be specific here, and we're going back to that detail. Instead of, we could use help. Maybe, can you pick up groceries for me this week? Would you mind helping to drive us to an appointment? People want to help, but they need direction. So if you're writing for this community, or just speaking to them, you want to help give that direction. But big picture too, you also want to include hope and joy. Your child has MSMDS, but they are not MSMDS. So when you're sharing that story, yes, your reality includes challenges and complexities that not everybody will understand, but it also includes joy and moments that are funny and proud achievements. So this is the audience that you want to give them the whole picture of what's going on, so that they can understand that your child might have complexities, but they're also the same person that they care about and that you care about really deeply. The key here is balancing honesty with challenges, and showing how your family has grown and how you've remained resilient through this. The next audience is medical professionals, and everybody in this room has had plenty of experience talking to medical professionals. Whether you're talking to or writing to medical professionals, what you want to focus on is the three P's. So that's precision, patterns, and progress. They are trained to think a little bit more systematically. So they're looking for objective markers. They want to hear measurable data that they can kind of base their decisions on. So when you're writing for a medical audience, you want to match that framework. You want to lead with the most clinically relevant information for that provider. So if you're speaking to cardiology, lead with cardiac symptoms before you mention anything else. If you're talking to neurology, you want to lead with neurological symptoms before anything else. If you're talking to a researcher about your child's condition, lead with something that's the most relevant to their research questions. You want to structure this more chronologically and include specific measurements wherever is possible. So you might say, instead of being able to walk 100 feet without assistance, now she needs support after 50 feet. Document everything. Keep a medical timeline, track any changes, because all of this is going to be really helpful when you're speaking to your doctor. And there are tools out there that you can track all of this data with based on kind of what you're looking for. One option that I suggest is MeJo, which is created by another vet in the rare disease community. because he wanted to be able to have all of his child's documentation and charts and everything in one spot. But there's also something when you're talking to medical professionals that you want to be aware of, which is that they should also know your child as a person. And that includes what's important to your family, and how those medical decisions that are being made are going to affect your daily life. With, neurological or gastro or any other issues here, maybe your big focus for your child is socialization. You want them to be able to go spend some time with friends or travel to the conference and be okay for the day. So you want to make sure that you're effectively communicating that to your doctor. When we make treatment decisions, I want to center XYZ as my goal. And this way, as you move forward, your doctor understands kind of where your child is, but also where you want them to be, rather than just kind of being like, I don't know, what's next for us? The more information that you give your doctors and the more effective you get at communicating this medical story, the better prepared your doctor also is to share that with their other physician friends, and their community. Rare is hard to learn about. Yes, there's 400 million people in the world who have a rare condition. It breaks down, I think, to about 1 in 10. But some communities are really small, and that makes it hard to get that information out there. And so as you share with your doctor, you're also better poised to, they're better poised to share that, and we can expand that research focus. And the final one is media, or just the broader community. So this is going to be if you're writing for a website, if you're writing on social media, if you're sharing something online. And the big pictures here are advocacy, awareness, and education. You're not writing this story for sympathy or pity or even necessarily support here. You're doing it because you want to drive change. So a lot of times when you're talking to the broader community, if you want to get something out there in the news or online, you want to do what people call a hook, which is kind of why this is newsworthy, why it's relatable, why it's important to share. So this could be something that's unique to your family. It can be a broader issue that affects many families, or it can connect to current events in politics. So you want to start with something that immediately establishes the stake of the issue. So a lot, of your children have had to deal with surgeries. So maybe it's, my child's surgery costs more than most people spend on groceries in 2 months. Maybe it's, the medication that the doctors want to provide is only accessible in 2 states, and I have to fight with insurance for 3 weeks every month just for them to ship it to me. This combines that kind of specific detail with the bigger picture and those issues, and that draws readers in more. Also, thank you. I know I'm Italian. I talk with my hands a lot, so I can feel myself doing it. Media audiences are also going to be a little less complex than that medical story. You might use analogies that kind of illuminate what you're talking about. You don't want to oversimplify and make it so that it doesn't seem like it's very important, but you do want to make it accessible for readers of all backgrounds and all different areas across the country or the world. You can connect that to bigger issues in the rare disease community. But the biggest and most important piece of writing your story for this audience is including a call to action, which is what do you want the readers to do with that information? So that might be fundraising. That's a big picture issue. It might be having more people sign up for the registry. It might be the Advocacy Alliance wanting more people to submit stories. Either way, how you might structure that is a specific scene. This is what our morning looks like. Then you tie in the medical or policy context. So this is why this matters. Then you go into the systemic issue. Here's what needs to change. And you end with that call to action. Here's what you can do to contribute to that change. Remember that media stories and the internet are forever. My parents told me that when I was little, and it's even more true now. But that also means that you can reach really, really wide audiences that you might not be able to reach otherwise. You can also, because I know that protecting your family and kind of keeping certain things private is a really big deal for a lot of people. So you can decide in advance what you're comfortable sharing, and you can stick to that. And I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but if any, reporters or writers or anybody tries to push you on that boundary, it's probably not somebody that you want. So regardless of which audience that you're trying to reach when you're writing, there are certain practices that will make your storytelling more effective. So before I dive into this, I want to add that another tool that is not on there is sometimes, like I said, I get anxious with public speaking, so I have notes. It's okay if you have to have notes. It's okay if you have to have notes if you're talking to someone or you're presenting. It's okay if you have to have notes when you're trying to write. You're allowed to have those tools. And so if that's something that makes you more comfortable or makes you feel more prepared, do that. Another idea is keeping a story journal. This can be recording certain moments. So maybe you have a really difficult day, or you have a funny moment with the provider, or there's something new that you saw that really interested you. By keeping a story journal, you have a record of those rich details that are going to really bring your story to life when you write it. The next is developing multiple versions of content, and that's different lengths for different audiences. So if you're speaking, you might want to have a 30-second elevator pitch, a 5-minute overview, or a 15-minute, okay, we're going really in depth here. If you're writing, you might have a blurb for social media, a short form article, those are usually around 300 words. Or if you really want to spill everything, you can have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 word written pieces that go over every detail that you want to include. You want to practice kind of transitioning between these based on your audience, and also how much time you'll have with that audience. Video. As you saw earlier, video can be really, really crucial for capturing those things that maybe you can't capture with written language. So we saw with the stroke video, you can see which side is stronger. If your child has a new symptom or a new behavior that you're not really sure about, or you're not sure how to describe, take a couple videos of it. And if you are talking to a medical audience or translating that information over there, that's going to be a lot more effective at getting that point across. Use specific detail. We talked about the importance of detail earlier, but that even goes down to like, we had a good or bad day. Okay, on good days, this happens. On bad days, this happens. So kind of using that will help you flesh out your story and give a little bit more insight into your lived experience. You also want to prepare for common questions. A lot of times, whether you're writing or you're speaking your story, you're going to get a lot of the same questions on prognosis and treatment. When did you get diagnosed? What happened when you got diagnosed? What are the next steps? That's fine. That's really the foundation of what you're trying to share. But if you don't want to center your story on just that, be prepared to kind of get that out of the way so that you can focus on the details that you want to get across and the story that you're trying to tell. And last, remember that your story matters, because it does. Every single story and every single voice in this room matters, and people deserve to hear it, and you deserve to share it. But telling your story, telling your child's story can be really exhausting, and it's a form of emotional labor that not a lot of people talk about. It can leave you drained, especially if you're already managing a bunch of other needs and a bunch of other care. But also, again, if you have to go into those difficult moments of diagnosis or behavior or anything else that can be a little challenging, it does weigh on you. So you should set boundaries on how much you share. You don't know anybody your deepest struggles, and frankly, you don't have to prove anything to anybody either. So you can acknowledge that you've gone through difficulty without having to provide every detail. And again, if you're speaking to someone or you're doing an interview for a written story, it's okay to say, I don't want to talk about that, or I'm not comfortable discussing that, and then redirect the conversation. Take breaks when you need them, especially after intensive periods where you're sharing your story a lot. So that can be conferences, it can be big doctor's visits, it could be hospital stays, it could be interviews. Build in some recovery time after that, because even though this work really matters, your health and well-being also really matters. You want to find your community of people who get it, which is, again, everybody in this room right now. They understand the challenges that you're facing, and they can provide feedback on your story. You might say, hey, I need to talk to my doctor about this issue. Here's what I've written. Here are the questions I have. Do you think that's okay? And someone else can look and they can kind of give you guidance based on maybe their experience. And when it feels overwhelming, these are the people that you're going to be relying on. Remember, while you're doing this, storytelling can feel burdensome sometimes. It can feel like a lot having to share that part of yourself or try to figure out what to say. But if you're struggling, reconnect to your deeper purpose. You're not sharing your story for entertainment, and again, you're not sharing it for sympathy. You're sharing it because it has the power to make change. Your child's story is already powerful. It's a story of love, adaptation, resilience, medical complexity, and at the end of the day, hope for a better future. Today, we've talked a little bit about how to harness that, but I want to leave you with a few reminders before we move into the workshop portion. And that's, remember that your story will evolve. Your child is going to grow older, and challenges and treatments are going to change. As you adapt, the details that you want to share, or the ideas or facts that you want to emphasize, are going to be different. What serves you right now may not serve you next year, or even next month. But know that that's okay, and it's necessary. You're also not responsible for being perfect. The perfect storyteller, the perfect parent, the perfect person. You're responsible for being authentic, strategic, and protective of your family's well-being. Some conversations are going to go better than others. Some stories are going to be received better than others. Some audiences will understand what you're trying to get across immediately, and others will need some more insight and explanation. Some people will surprise you positively with their responses, and some of them are going to disappoint you too. All of that, though, is part of the process. What matters is that no matter what else you face, you keep telling that story. Because it matters. It matters to the doctors who's never seen someone with MSMDS before. Matters to the researcher who's trying to focus on a certain idea or treatment plan. Matters to the insurance reviewer who might now recognize the importance of approving something. It matters to the families who are newly diagnosed, who are looking for somewhere to go and someone to show them that they're not alone in this. And it matters to the broader community who's never heard of this rare disease and who might just become a lifelong advocate after you share your story. We are going to go into a little workshop session. I brought pens and paper for everybody. But before that, I want to see if anybody has any questions that I can answer, and I will kind of walk around during the workshop portion. But if anybody has anything kind of front of mind, I can answer that before we jump in. Okay. Does anybody need paper and pens? Something more. Who does?
Yeah, we run it back there. And paper.
So being part of the rare disease community can be physically and emotionally challenging, but it also gives you a unique perspective and a powerful story. So in this workshop, we're going to talk about how to write as a tool for self-expression, empowerment, and advocacy. By sharing your story, again, you have the power to raise awareness, to connect with others, and to advocate for better support, funding, and resources. So before we begin, and before we do a little bit more like deeper workshopping, I created some little icebreakers just to kind of get your thoughts flowing. So for the next few minutes, just take some time to kind of pick one of these that resonates with you and write a little bit about your particular experience. So caring for someone with MSMDS has taught me what? One thing I wish more people understood is what my biggest source of support for this journey has been, or something I hope for the future is. And in a few minutes, I will kind of get back to you guys and we'll go through some icebreaker stuff and then we'll move into a little bit heavier writing. I know that wasn't super long, and we will get back to writing, but does anybody want to share, a few thoughts that you wrote down?
I'll share with you.
Okay.
Do we want a microphone right here?
You could still hear on the Zoom.
Okay, cool. So caring for someone with MSMDS has taught me how to stop being the quietest person in the room, and how to advocate for my child's healthcare.
True.
Does anybody else have anything that they want to share with the room?
I wrote MSMDS has taught me to be flexible. Because it's a wave. From storm to that, like. Maneuver. So what I say never comes, is what I find.
So I have two really quick case studies, about people that I've personally worked with and how storytelling has kind of helped them, advance their goals. So the first was S, and she was looking for research into her child's condition. It's an ultra rare genetic disorder. And at the time we spoke, there were about 50 known cases. And she said, or 100 people. She told me 50 and then we ended it later. But she said to me, I can't figure out how to get a research focus on my child's disorder. And so when we wrote the story, we focused on how that kind of manifested in the day-to-day for our child, some of the more complex medical complexities that she hadn't seen before. Publishing that story, we connected on an interview, an article, and social media support. It's actually one of the most contacted articles I've ever had. I had 5 new families that were newly diagnosed reach out. She advocated for newborn screening changes in her state and ended up having that put on the panel. And 4 separate researchers, it's now 6, have gotten in touch, saying that she seemed to have the most comprehensive information on that disorder that they had ever seen. And we were able to make those connections between her and the researchers. So she now has research eyes on her disease. Number 2 was a newly diagnosed woman who reached out because doctors were not giving her enough information on the disorder. She found online a lot about how other people were kind of treating it or how it was traditionally treated, but she didn't feel that her symptom management was very good and her doctor wasn't giving her a lot. She found a story that I had written with another family, reached out, was able to connect, and they were able to provide information that not only assisted with symptom management, but helped get her into the right doctor that would listen to her. She feels that she could have accomplished this on her own had she kept pushing with her doctors, but this story was a great way for her to find other members of the community and kind of push that forward. Your story is just as impactful. So I have a few prompts up here. Choose one audience we spoke about earlier and speak to them. Maybe you have an upcoming specialist appointment in a couple months and you want to make sure that you're getting that story across as effectively as possible. Maybe you just want to explain it better to well-intentioned family members that don't always get it. You can also write a letter to yourself from a year ago. What would you want that earlier version of yourself to know that you know now? Share what you wish other family members knew about your experience or your child. Try to explain MSMDS in simple, accessible language. Describe a typical day in your household. What routines or adaptations may some people not see? Or tell about a time your child surprised you, good or bad. But as you kind of move forward and you start drafting, you don't have to stick to one of these prompts. I did a workshop last year where someone said to me, my diagnosis was pretty simple. I have no complications. I don't have anything to write about. And so I asked her, okay, what's important to you? Doesn't have to be your condition. She said, advocacy is important to me. I said, okay, write about that. That's your story. So as you're kind of drafting, you can pick one of these prompts and write about it, but you can also kind of go off on your own. And really the rest of this session is going to be just, if you want to practice writing your story, you can do that for the next, 10 to 15 minutes, and I can come around and give some thoughts or feedback. But yeah, this is just a time for you guys to kind of practice getting this all down, and seeing where you might want to improve or what you might want to improve on. Okay, so, because we're getting a little later in the day, we are actually gonna kind of wrap this up. But this will be sent, could be shared with everybody. And I'm gonna share, there's also some resources on storytelling for parents, that I'm happy to send around. And also here's my contact information. So once you get those prompts, if you want any feedback, if you want to share your story, if you want to sit down for an interview, if you want to do anything like that, you can feel free to shoot me an email. You can also find me on social media at Rareatives, on mostly Instagram or at rareatives.com. Yeah.
Real quick. Good. So I just wanted to add, you guys, I know everybody's like really tired and like ready to go probably. This is a really important thing to do. Like there are families in this room who found other families through their stories. I think it was the last conference and I can't remember exactly who, but Meg and Josh Dawkins, their daughter Indy, there was a family here that came across this disorder and found them first because of the story that the Dawkins family had written, and otherwise would have been alone and non-connected because it was before Enacted to Alliance, and before this community was really what we are now. So if you take the time to sit, and think about how you want to write these things and put them out there for other people to find, it helps the community grow. It helps with our fundraising. The more things that come up that say, an aptitude mutation or MSMDS or anything related to our disorder, the more likely we are to make waves out in the community. So whatever you guys can do, I know Nick and Tyann, you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, you did a news article 2 years ago, and then a family found you through that news article, right? There was another family who also had not been connected. Since we've been sitting here today, we've had 2 new families reach out to us with this diagnosis that have not been in contact with anybody before. So guys, it matters. It matters. Your stories are important. Your kids' stories are important. Please take the time because it's going to help us all move forward as a community. Just to add one more thing, a year or two ago, I don't know how long ago, I met with Jessica and she did a full story on Raceland and it came out beautiful. It's just an easy piece to share for advocacy and when people want to know more about him. And I know she's willing to work with whoever might be interested in doing that.